That's going to be about it today.
They were out of brown rice on the block.
Hello, everyone. I'm talking today about treasures from the museum. So it's one of those topics I came up with, thinking that, okay, that means I can basically do whatever I want, just be a little random, so it didn't involve a lot of research. So just chose a few artifacts. Some have been on display for a long time, some haven't. Some of them you may not have never seen before. But this is one we've had on display pretty much as long as I've been here, which is 34 years now. And this is a chair that was found in a cabin at French Creek. It was actually some of the original members of the Historical Society in the early 60s. They did a little reconnaissance trip to French Creek, and they found some artifacts there. And this was one that they took out of an old cabin, and it was, you can see that it's woven of cedar bark, and really nice piece. And when you look on the arms of the chair, you can see that there's some sort of writing scratched in, or it could even be like the sawmill marks on the wood on the arms of the chair. And this is the cabin that it came out of.
Is it very sturdy?
Well, we don't sit on it, so I can't say for sure. We've got a string across it so nobody can check it out. I think it probably was, but
Why did the cedar bark not fall apart then?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it stayed. It stayed. And we haven't used it. We haven't sat on it. It's been here in the museum for 40 years.
Would you be able to sit on it still? Like, would it support
no.
someone? Or would it just break?
Well, we wouldn't ever try it out, so
Okay.
we wouldn't. We're not going to test that.
You got a sign on it, don't you?
Yeah, we do, and the string across too.
Where is French Creek?
French Creek is north of Revelstoke. It's a Gold Stream, comes into the Columbia River, probably about, let's say about 60, 70 miles north of Revelstoke. The Gold Stream comes in, and then the French Creek flows into the Gold Stream. So it's one of the early areas there where there was a lot of gold being found. There was a couple of French Canadians that established some of the early mines in the Big Bend. This was during the Big Bend gold rush in the 1860s. This cabin doesn't date back that long, I'm quite sure. But there was subsequent mining and people up in that area much later than that as well. So the chair doesn't date from the 1860s.
Some of the cabins up there, Calvin, are pretty, they were talking 40 years ago, the wing that went up, and there was a lot of old cabins.
There's some that do date back.
I think they're all gone now, Kathy.
Somebody sent us a couple of pictures just last week that they found. I think they'd taken the photographs last year, and it shows sort of the base of a log cabin. You can still see sort of a couple of the bottom logs, but the actual cabins themselves, I don't think any of them exist. But there's still a little, bit.
They were bulldozed in the 70s. But you can still go and recreationally pan for gold if you think you're going to get rich.
Yeah, there's some open areas in there. Yeah, there is actually a
That's a question here, because I'm lost the whole history. So in 1860, arguably this would be the nicest land in Canada, right? The valleys would have been lush with vegetation, and there would have been fast running water, and there would be lots of fish and abundance of hunting. So this would be your prime real estate back in 1860, right? So it would essentially have to be, there's one log home, there's got to be a lot of them, because that would be where the...
Well, in that area, it was
They're all
miners.
bulldozed.
There was a gold rush going on in that area, so there wasn't really any settlement. It was just very transitory at that
What
time.
about the native people? Would they not have loved to live in this land?
They were in this land, but they had their own settlements. They weren't using this style of, they weren't building log cabins at that point. And in fact, by 1871, the Sinaiax people had been become part of the Colville Confederated Tribes.
So it was probably their land before and they were kicked off the land, and these guys put the log
Well,
cabins in?
we don't really know how far up the Big Bend they used. There's definitely evidence that they had settlements in the Big Eddy here.
Yeah.
But it's debatable about how far up the bend they had actual settlements. There's actually no record of them having permanent settlements north of Revelstoke. But they probably did use the land, but it was more friendly from about here farther south.
Have you heard the theory that the Big Bend and the Big Eddy are essentially the same spot and they got renamed? Like
No.
The Nelson Mountains got renamed and they renamed the Big Bend up there?
No, Big Bend and Big Eddy were always two separate things. The Big Eddy refers to actual River Eddy
Yeah,
that happens just north of the traffic bridge.
okay.
And it was referred to by the early, the fur traders who were coming here in the early 1800s,
Yeah.
because it was a strong river eddy, so they called it the Big Eddy, or the Eddy.
Okay.
And the Big Bend is just referred to the bend of the Columbia River between here and Golden.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is probably one of my favorite artifacts. It's a fur press, and I had a couple of curators from the Royal BC Museum here a few years ago, and they went gaga over this. They were just, they said they'd never seen a 20th century fur press before. All the ones they'd seen had been sort of more the crude fur trading post presses. They hadn't seen one that had been manufactured in this way. So this was actually made for F.B. Wells in about 1911 by a couple of builders, and it was, F.B. Wells was a merchant. He had a men's clothing store called Wells Menswear, and his motto was "Wells wears well." And so he was buying and selling furs. So he was buying from a lot of the local trappers. And then he would ship the raw furs back to, mostly to Montreal or to Winnipeg, where they would be processed. And the interesting thing, I think one of the reasons I like this so much, just because, you know, it's a very unusual artifact, but it really speaks of the importance of trapping in this region, how important trapping was to the economy. There was a lot of the miners in the area also had trap lines, and I think most of them probably made more money on their trap lines than they did on their mining claims. The interesting thing is, if you look on the side of the fur press, you can actually see where people have written in. So that says skunk up there, and then it says 20 bear, and then they've tallied it up to 45, and then another notation there in bear, and there's some dates on there, 1914, 1917, 1913, and on the other side of the post, there's a note somebody's written in 5 grizzly. And the other reason that I really like this artifact is that we have an archival document that goes with it and helps us to interpret the artifact as well. So this is actually F.B. Wells' ledger, and I have it up here. And at the top of the columns across, it has the names of the animals that he was buying, the furs that he was buying. We've got marten, mink, beaver, weasels, otter, lynx, wolverine, fisher, rats, coyote, bear, skunk, and castors, which is the beaver oil.
No cougar or wolves? No cougars or wolves?
In the other, occasionally there's cougar or wolf, but he doesn't have them listed. And then, so you can actually, that's for a period of time from about 1914 onward. So you can actually go through there and see the numbers of animals that were being trapped in the area. This particular one right here, where is he? This is A. Wood. This is the column for marten. So in April of 1914, this Mr. Wood brought in 103 marten and he was paid $654.65 for the marten furs. And that Woods total, if I take it all the way across in the original book, you can see that his total for that 1 month was $1,400.
Wow.
And that was about, that was close to a year's salary at that time. So he was making good money on his fur, on his trap line.
Could we learn more about who this guy Wood was? Do you have any other?
No, I don't have any other information on him.
Okay.
The third name down said Oscar Meyer. But
Oh my goodness.
it looks like Oscar, but M-E-Y-E-R,
Yeah,
but he's got nothing there. He didn't-
well, it could be on the other columns, because you'd have to go through the book to see.
Maybe he was just there to make the sausages.
There is one name there that's recognizable, that Ed Mulvihill, and he ran the ferry, the 12-mile ferry south of town for many years.
Is that a Kennedy right above him too?
Yeah, it looks like Kennedy.
That's a big name, right?
Well, not necessarily around here. Corey Meninick was a miner in the Camborne. He was actually one of the people that really established the mining area of Camborne. This is another really unusual and important artifact that we have in our collection. It's a tree blaze where somebody has carved a message into this tree, and it says, Steamer 49, delayed in consequence of high water, July 4th, 66. So that's obviously 1866. And this is really the only physical record we have of the Steamer 49 that came up here during the gold rush of the 1860s. There was Captain Leonard White who had built this boat around in the Colville area, and he was bringing it up to the Big Bend mines they started out in 1865, but didn't make it up into the area until 1866, the spring of that year. And he was bringing miners and supplies. He only made a few trips up and down the river. He would make sure that anybody he was bringing up here, that they had to be able to pay their full fare, and they had to have a full year's grub stake with them. So enough supplies to last them for a year, or otherwise he wouldn't bring them up on his boat. But on the down trip, he would take anybody, whether they had any money or not, so just to help them get back out of the area, because it was a gold rush. There was thousands of people flocking in, and not that many of them really made much on it, so there was a lot of them going out in the big rush as well. So this was actually brought in by Cal Upper. Yeah.
Kathy, how much gold was extracted during the gold rush?
Well, I've seen estimates of $3 million in 1866 values. So it was considerable, and that's what was reported. There was probably a lot more besides that wasn't reported. So it was considerable. It doesn't, not in terms of the Yukon or the Caribou, but still it was a considerable rush. There was a lot of easy pickings to be found by the first people who got in there. But as a lot of the areas, it was hard to get in and hard to get out. It was hard to get supplies in. So it wasn't a very long-lived one.
Kathy, I've been reading some books. Do you know anything about this William Downey guy, gold prospector from 1860?
I do, but I'm not going to get into that today. We can talk about that later, okay?
Cool.
Yeah, he was so Downey Creek was named after William Downey. He was one of the early miners that started the gold rush. So this was, that blaze was brought in by Cal Upper, who was the uncle of Ken Grantstrom and Shirley Ludwig. And he found it on the west bank of the river. So this is sort of showing in relationship to, so that's where the dam is now. So it was just south of the dam on the west bank. And he explained to us how there was an eddy that formed in that area, so it would have been really hard for them to get through there. So in high water, they wouldn't have been able to get any farther than that. So that's why they had tied up in that area.
And just waited for the water to go down?
Yeah, So it's basically, that's an 1866 text message. Or a Twitter, a tweet.
When did you find this, Kathy?
Well, Cal Upper found it.
Yes, but when?
I'd say 40, 50 years ago.
Okay.
Because it was in the museum when I started working here.
Is it on display?
Yes, it's in one of the cases downstairs.
Better look some more.
Would you ever, like, would it be a big faux pas to like oil it to?
I'd have to talk to a conservator.
Mhm.
It definitely is splitting, so, I don't like to move it very much. But I'd have to talk to a conservator to see if we should be doing that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't touch it without getting
Yeah.
expert advice.
But I'm just thinking, A, you would be able to read it better if you oiled it. The cuttings would show up more. And it might keep it from deteriorating to a point where you.
Yeah, I think this is one that's definitely worth us talking to a conservator.
Yeah.
To get
How are ya?
some advice on how to do it, but I'm not gonna touch it.
I'm okay, I'm at
Until I get
a function right now. Can I give you a call back?
And,
Okay, I'll call you back in about
Artifact
half an
we've got
hour.
over here.
Okay, Mom. Bye-bye.
This is a seltzer bottle from the Revelstoke Wine and Spirit Company. And we've actually have a couple of these that have their logo on. And then there was another one, the same owner also had a distillery in Vernon. So that one we sent to Vernon. And this is the Wine and Spirit Company. It was located where the RCMP detachment is now. And,
Ironic.
yeah. Nice little bit of synergy there.
Is that guy any relation to Roy? Roy's
Yes,
man?
that'd be Royce Smith's brother,
Okay.
younger brother.
You're not swimming up there, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I never even noticed. Good eye. Good eye, Carol. And this is the exterior of the building. It was originally the Acme Soda Water Works, and then they turned it into the Wine and Spirit Company. They sort of merged a couple of companies. But that was the building that was where the RCMP detachment is now. This is an interesting little artifact. This came in probably not long after I started working here, so sometime in the 1980s. It's just a little journal, and it's this fellow who was keeping his diary. His name was John James Porter, and he was born in Prince Edward Island, and in 1887 he was working around the Field and Golden area on a bridge and building gang. And years ago I transcribed the whole thing, so it's a little bit easier to read now. But I really like it. He turned 24 years old on February 1st, and he starts his first entry on January 1st, 1887. And it's basically this young fellow who's working far from home in the mountains. He hates his job and he hates his boss, and he's having girlfriend trouble. So it's just,
Typical.
It's just such a great piece. This is January 1st, 1887. New Year's Day, snowing in the morning but cleared up before dinner. Pay car came along about 9 p.m., drew $63, paid board $22.25. Am cooking today, have been since the 14th of last month. Working for F. Johnson on bridge repairs, etc. I'm at Palliser, BC. I'd rather a dull New Year's than Christmas. And then he says, this is a few days later, January 4th, 1887. Dark day, snowing part of day, putting braces in the earth tunnel. Played cards a short time in evening. Mended my overall. There are only 3 of us beside Johnson, who's the crew boss. William Cole, Frank Kissinger, and self. It kills Johnson to have to help lift the hand car. We made him pump going down and coming home too. He thinks we have a right to carry him up and down on that car deadhead, but I guess he will find he has the wrong boys to fool with this time. A. Dahlquist and H. Brittany are up at Lagan fixing turntable. They had to pay their fare up. What fools some people are. If I had been in their places, I would have let the comm put me off the train. Harry Lynch, the cook, gave us rather a fancy dinner today. The giblets of the turkey, and did not take the dirt out of them. It kind of spoiled my dinner. And then he says, a bit later, January 6th, pretty cold, still putting up vents in the earth tunnel. Johnson himself had a few words today. I think we will soon have him tamed down a bit. All the boys are on him. January 10th, pretty cold. Did not go out this AM. Had rheumatism in the left arm. Did not go out in the afternoon. I think I'm getting too lazy, or else getting so blamed tired of the big Swede. Oh, but I am sick of that man. And then, so it continues on, just sort of daily life, working on this crew, and talking about his girlfriend Gertie, and he finally leaves the area, and he's in South Dakota for a while, and he's wandering around. So eventually, he talked about his girlfriend Gertie, and he eventually did marry a woman named Melissa Gertrude, who was also from Prince Edward Island. So I assumed that he made up with Gertie. But the reason that this came into our hands is it was found in the walls of this house. And this was, this is where the McCarty Bed and Breakfast is now. So this is 3rd Street here and Mackenzie Avenue. So that's the next house down. And that house was built by Porter. And a previous owner was doing some work and opened up a wall and found the diary in there and brought it into the museum. So John James Porter and his wife Gertrude lived there until about 1912 when they moved to Winnipeg. They had one son died as an infant, but they had two other children that survived. And he served on city council for a while as an alderman in the early days. So that's John James Porter, and we have his youthful journal diary in our collection.
So he came back after he got married. He came back and lived in Revelstoke.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure what brought him to. He was still working for the railway, but rose up from the bridge gang. I think he was a brakeman or on a running crew. Yes. Now this is another one of my favorite pieces from the archives. This is a police record book that goes back to 1889. You can see the top entry there. It's May 26, 1889. And it has the informant, who is the person who brought the charge forward. And sometimes that's just the police officer in charge. The defendant, the offense, the time and costs, and then the next column over, which I didn't photograph, has like any notes and whether they served, whether they were sent on to a prison or not. But there's things like offense, theft, vagrancy, causing disturbance. There's a lot of D&D, which is drunken disorderly. There were, I don't think any of them show up on this page, but in this book, for 1 year, I counted the names of 50 women who were working as prostitutes in Revelstoke. And they were brought in on a variety of charges. Sometimes it was, they called it on vagrancy, sometimes they called it keeping a house of ill repute, or being an inmate of a house of ill repute. But there was a variety of charges. Sometimes it would just be violation of bylaw, whatever number. There was a bylaw on public morals. So the women who were brought in, they were treated differently if they were the madam or the keeper of the house. The madams were charged between $10 and $20 every time they were brought in. And the women, or they referred to them as inmates of the brothels, were fined between $1 and $5 most of the times that they were brought in. But the women who were established in town were being brought in like 4 to 5 times a year. So the city was actually getting quite a bit of money off of these women.
And the next day they went back to work.
Yeah. A lot of them, they were established brothels there. sometimes you'll see a note in one where it'll say they put a woman, they'll have her name there under a prostitution charge, and then they'll say put her on the next train. So if they were sort of catching new transient women coming in, they would just sort of send them out again. But there were a lot of established people here.
What did the city expect would happen with these women? I mean,
If they sent them away,
yeah.
or if I don't think they really cared. I think they figured they'd just, go to the next town, or there were no social safety nets in place, so.
No, there weren't. And, what did they expect these women would do? Just die on the side of the road rather than surrender their virtue, or what?
Well, I guess they figured if they had, I think there was sort of a thought that they had enough in town. So if any new women tried to establish, they just sent them on to the next town because they, somebody else's problem.
It was like competition came into town. We don't want competition to send them out of town. That's basically, it was a corrupt system, right?
No.
So this is the only photograph we have of any of the brothels. And there were several brothels on Front Street and Douglas Street. They were really restricted to that area. There weren't a lot in other areas of town, but or not that I'm aware of anyway. But they're very well dressed, and if you have a close look at the photograph, you can see there's at least a couple of those paintings on the walls are nudes, which you wouldn't find in your typical upper class Revelstoke sitting room. But it's very interesting reading the police book.
Was there, because you talked before about how there wasn't that many women in town, at least in certain points of time anyways, but then there was these brothels. Was there ever records of women like marrying out of the brothel?
Yes,
So would that happen?
it did happen.
Okay.
Yeah. We know several instances
Okay.
where that did happen. We have the 1901 census, and there's several women whose names in the census I recognize from the police book, and about maybe 3 or 4 of them actually gave their occupation as prostitute. But most of them gave their occupation as musician or waitress or some other occupation. But a couple of them obviously didn't care. So
And then multiple streams of income.
Quite upfront about it, and we're willing to say that that's what they were doing. This is probably one of my favorite artifacts. I'm going to turn the light on them for a minute. I just find this really, really funny. This is, well actually, can you tell me what this is?
Spittoon.
It's a spittoon. It's pink, and it's very frilly, and it's a spittoon. It was used in the Victoria Hotel, which was one of the big hotels on Front Street, this building here. And most of the spittoons we have are just metal, brass or some other metal. But this is a very fancy one. But the really funny thing, there's 2 little seams on there, one up on the rim there and one on the side. And if you can come and have a look afterwards. If you look closely, both of the pictures depict men in lederhosen harassing barmaids. I find that one very amusing.
What's a spittoon?
Where men would spit
spit.
chewing
Oh,
tobacco.
okay. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, so that's why it's so funny
Yeah.
that it's so pretty and frilly.
It's for the women.
I anticipate that the metal ones last longer than the China.
Yeah, probably. But look at this one, it's intact. So,
Yeah.
we're very happy
It's
to get
probably
that.
too nice to spit in.
Oh, yeah. That's
Nope, never met
Yeah,
a
so
guy
this
that
was
chewed
the Victoria
tobacco.
Hotel on
Cared about that.
Front Street. It was one of the early hotels. Originally started by William Cowan, who was, I'll be talking about him at the cemetery tour. He was one of Revelstoke's early entrepreneurs.
When's the cemetery tour?
Thursday at 7.
This Thursday?
Yeah.
Like tomorrow?
Yeah.
All right.
that would be, right? So anyway, William Cowan was responsible for Revelstoke's Water, Light and Power Company, and he was also responsible for the telephone company. He had the first telephone in town between his hotel and the CPR station, and had very pretty spittoons.
He had a monopoly.
Another interesting artifact, that a couple of artifacts that came in from completely different sources. A couple of years, there was a lawn bowling club here for many years, and a couple of years ago, we had a donation of 4 balls and a leather pouch that belonged to a man named Percy Marshall, who came here in the early 1900s and was a member of the lawn bowling club. And these are his own balls, and they actually have his initial in the middle of them, so M for his last name. They're really lovely pieces, actually. They're wood. Actually, I'll let you pass them around. You do it one-handed. Yeah, one of them has his initial and the other one doesn't. It might have worn off.
This is one too, they just painted it.
Or is this something
I'm not entirely sure.
I think they did that.
Yeah, it can- Yeah, they're very pretty, aren't they? They're nice pieces.
Unfortunately, yes.
Don't chop it on your toe.
So the lawn bowling club was located next to the, so would that be about where the paint decorating
First
and the
impressions.
first impressions?
Yeah, farther towards the tracks.
Right.
Used to be kind of a S-turn in Victoria Road when we went around that.
Okay, so Victoria Road didn't go right through where it goes now.
Yeah. But, yeah.
And she curved, eh?
Yeah.
And then the other piece that came in from a completely, oh, you can leave it on for a second, that came in from a completely different donor. It's called the Jack Lee Trophy, Annual Ladies Singles Revelstoke Lawn Bowling Club. So we have those, before I really had nothing about the lawn bowling club, and then within a couple of years, we had the 2 really nice artifacts.
Too bad there wasn't a base for it with the names on it.
Yeah, this one doesn't, so some of them, they put the plaques on with the names of the team.
Does that say a year on it, Kathy?
This one doesn't, no.
That's about 1960, that picture with the
Yeah, because the
highways
The
under,
pictures, yeah.
the highways under construction up there.
Okay. Yeah, I know the club started at least in the 20s, or maybe even a bit earlier, but I'm not sure of when they built the building. I haven't been able to find out yet. So another artifact that we have here, another one that I found really cute.
I'll take it.
This is a calendar from Warren Brothers Company, and the Warren Brothers had a general store. They had their first store, they established it in about 1889, and it was across the tracks near the station. And then in 1912, they built what's now the Style Trend building. And so this calendar is from 1913, and it's a picture of this lovely young lady named Bernice, which would have been a little bit risque in 1913, but very pretty.
Didn't she live on?
Oh, not to the, it wouldn't have been so risque to the sophisticated set.
Yeah, probably not. She was fully clothed, but just very pretty.
All the church ladies over the scandal.
Yeah, so this is an artifact that Cheryl really liked, so we put this one up. This is a stone preserving jar, stone canning jar.
Oh, wow.
And the rim is metal. nothing inside, we checked. But the lid is also stoneware.
Where's that made, Kathy? Is that Mid-Alta?
This one, I don't know if this one doesn't have a maker's mark on it,
Did
so,
you put it into a hot water bath?
So I don't know,
How did they handle
maybe-
it?
This,
we do have quite a bit of Mandalta in our collection, but this one doesn't have a mark,
No.
maker's mark on it.
I'm just wondering if it wasn't more of a butter crock.
No, there was a few of them, wasn't there?
Yeah, we had a few.
Butter
that'd be a little
crock didn't
small
have
for a
seals.
butter crock.
Interesting though.
So this is Mrs. Griffith. She was the person who donated it. It was donated back in the 1960s. And they had a farm in Big Eddy. They came out from England in about 1906, 1907. And they established this farm over there. And she said that the first year while her husband was building the farm, she was mostly staying in town because she couldn't stand the mosquitoes over there. So they finally got their farm established, and there was no way of getting across to Big Eddy except by boat at that time, or going across the railway bridge. And she was talking about how much she was had been a musician in England, just loved culture and music. And there was a concert in the park one day, and she wanted to come across to the concert. So she and her husband walked across the railway bridge, each carrying a young child, one of their young children. And she was terrified the whole way across. And she couldn't enjoy the concert because she was thinking of the trip back. And she said there was somebody who was worked on the railway that saw her and took the baby from her so that she could walk across, and he carried the baby. But she swore that she would never come back into town until the highway bridge was built, and that happened in 1910.
Tad neurotic.
Well, a little bit scared of walking across the railway bridge with a baby.
Tad neurotic.
Another interesting artifact, this is the register of the Scandinavian Aid and Fellowship Society of America. So it was a lodge, but it was specifically for people from Scandinavia. And we've got the entries here, and they've written their name, the year that they were born, their birthplace, and their occupation. And it's written in either Swedish or Norwegian. So I've had a few people, researchers in from Sweden and Norway, who've been doing genealogical research, and they've been able to use this book to track when their family members lived here. It's the kind of thing we really enjoy, things that can really help us to interpret the history, and really useful for genealogists.
You got a note to my grandma's name in there.
Is that right?
Ellen Excel.
Does it give occupation, or just being married? Whereabouts is she?
Yeah, but you put it on a different thing. I think your
Oh.
page that you,
Oh, the page there is different than the one I
oh, you
have.
went and changed it again?
Maybe.
Oh, no, here she is. She doesn't have what,
Doesn't have a birthplace.
no, it just says where she came from and that, but not her occupation.
So a lot of them is Arbitar, which was a forester. Where did it go? So, oh, I almost forgot one. Your favorite one, or a couple here.
Oh, yes, that one.
This is one of Cheryl's favorite.
Oh, thanks.
Corset.
My God.
So this is why women were fainting all the time, and why they had so many miscarriages and died in childbirth, because they would
So look what
use
turns it is.
but
It's
yeah, that's-
1888, isn't it? The
Yes,
date's in
the
there.
patent date on this one is 1888. And this one had, do you remember, did this one have metal in it? Yes, this
It's
one actually
metal.
has metal in it. Some of them had whalebone, but this one actually has metal staves in it.
Oh my God.
So that wouldn't have been very fun.
Who designed those things? Were those designed by Wynn?
I mean, there were some that were actually functional working ones for farm women to like a back brace. So when you were carrying heavy loads, because women carry a lot of weight, and some of them had like a piece of wood down the middle called a bisque or something that actually helped you keep proper posture standing up. So
Oh, good
there-
posture.
Yeah, well,
Perfect.
there was like for pioneer women, there was some useful ones.
Yeah, the fashion ones
That
weren't all
one looks
that
like
kind
a
of,
for-
they were really sort of promoting what they called a wasp waist.
Yes.
You know, sort of the really thin waist and the larger bust and the larger hip.
The scariest thing is that there's girls doing this again.
Yeah.
Like Kim Kardashian is popularizing this thing called like waist training,
Yeah.
where you wear them, and exercise in them and stuff, and it like literally people are doing it again, and that's the scariest
The
part.
Yeah.
sad thing is that
Yeah.
organs get rearranged when you wear.
Yeah, exactly, it did rearrange
Yeah.
their organs. That's why women did die in childbirth, because
Come on.
they weren't, they weren't very healthy for them.
Admit it, they're just instruments of the patriarchy.
Well, that too. Kim's grandmother sold corsets for spirella corsets, because she was a single mother, and that was one of her things that she was able to make some money for the family, was by selling corset,
And the muzzle.
the muzzle. And I found out what this is.
What?
This is, it was it was just listed on the tag as muzzle, but I looked up the number, and it actually came from the farm of Rolly and Tina Holt, which is south of town, and it's a calf muzzle, so that the calf wouldn't nurse when it was out in pasture.
Oh, we thought it might be a bear.
We wondered if it was a bear muzzle. First we thought it was like it was a calf muzzle. So we have, there are things in our collection that we don't entirely know what they are sometimes too. So sometimes it takes a bit of research to figure out what things are. And then this is another, is a baby scale for weighing your baby. Weighs up to 30 pounds. So, and it says not legal for trade. So you couldn't do it, use it to sell your baby by the pound. But this actually came out of the drugstore. It was donated by Stephen when they moved. It was one of the things that was in their building.
No girdles, to go with that corset?
Oh, we have girdles, I think, or do we?
I know we don't have a girdle.
I'm not sure that we do. We've got lots of camisoles.
Yeah.
We have lots of,
Pantaloons, but no girdles.
yeah, we have some pretty interesting bloomers.
Yeah, I'll say.
We have quite a good collection of women's clothing.
Should have a
especially
fashion
for
show
the-
someday.
What's that?
Should have a fashion show one day.
all faint.
I want to see Bill wearing the boomers.
Yeah, I know you would, Dave, but I'm not going to.
So when you take your babies into the drugstore to be weighed, is
That possibly, yeah.
They usually have little pads in there.
Probably for medication too, so they know exactly how much to give them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just here, like, meant for like dosages to figure out what dosage to give.
Before there's public health nurses like that. I have a friend, when we were in folk dancing years ago, who we all made our costumes, and she came in a beautiful blouse to go with a beautiful skirt, and it was a beautiful blouse with lace on it. So she found her grandmother's bloomers, and she made this beautiful blouse out of the lace.
Oh.
So we rather use this.
Yeah, we have some quite beautiful, like undergarments at camisoles. Some of them are really quite lovely.
When I started teaching in the 90s, there was a woman who'd been teaching for a long time, and she said that when she first started teaching, you had to wear a girdle because you weren't allowed to have anything jiggle while you were writing on the board.
Oh, my.
She said, and then what did she say? But that all got replaced by blue jeans. Blue jeans are the new girdle.
So I decided to throw in an extra brown bag history because next Wednesday is National Aboriginal Day. And so I'm going to redo the talk on the Sinaiaks that I've done before. And then the following Wednesday will be our brown bag picnic, so I'll probably be sending out a note to anybody who wants to join us. If the weather's nice, we'll have a little picnic outside. And I usually throw in a little quiz to see what you've remembered over the past year. And then cemetery walking tour, I'm doing one tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, so meet at the cemetery. And then I've got, I'll be scheduling them like in 2 weeks. I've got another downtown walking tour, so that'd be on the 20, yeah, 20, whatever the next day.
28th or 29th.
The Thursday? of
Yeah,
the-
I'm doing a walking tour in 2 weeks. So yesterday was the 13th, so
27th.
we did 27th.
Okay, Tuesday.
At 11, yeah. And then another cemetery tour the Thursday after that. And then I'll be doing a couple more in July as well, so I'll advertise those. Anybody have any comments or questions?
Just thought about it. Do you have any old musical instruments or the old musical, they were records, they were metal, old or?
Yeah.
That music of the era too?
Yeah, I've got, we've got an Edison phonograph player with the cylinders. And then I have what's called a symphonian, which had sort of the metal records with the little holes in them. And then we've got gramophones. And so we've got quite a few old records, and got a lot of old sheet music as well. We just got a collection of stuff in last week that we were looking at, and there was tons of sheet music, and there was one that was actually totally different words for O Canada. Like somebody had, and it credited the original, like the Calypso Lavallee, who'd written the original and the original music, but it was totally different words. And I thought it was quite funny because, you know, we're always debating about 1 or 2 words in O Canada. This person had written completely new lyrics for it, so.
Where can I find out more about that, Kathy? What the original?
We haven't accessioned it yet, so it's not available yet.
Okay.
Any other questions?